Widescreen. Yes. Ah, there you are. Wonderful. Okay. So
Yeah,
yes,
so
you're
okay.
so you're in your house. Yes. I'm
Yes,
I'm in
yes.
my basement lab, and
Okay.
as you might be able to see, there's stuff everywhere. Yeah.
Can I just interrupt you for 1 second before I
Sure.
forget it? I need to
Sure.
record the conversation. I hope that's okay with you.
Oh, that's perfectly fine. So I'm recording it too.
Recording in
Okay, good.
progress.
Okay, good.
Uh-huh.
So in case
Yep.
something goes wrong with my recording, I can always contact you.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay, good.
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
So we're all recording and stuff. Yep. That's great.
Okay,
So
good.
not so I hear that you prefer to be called Bina. Is that right?
Yeah, like at work, people call me Bina. So yeah, because
Okay.
people mispronounce my name very easily. So I feel like it's easier for people to remember, and I don't have to remind them all the time. So like I go by Bina.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is your formal first name Sabina or Sabine?
Sabine.
Sabina. Okay. All right.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I
So
know
it's
there's
like
both boys. Yeah.
it's an pronounced E, but it sounds, I think, to American, it sounds a little bit like an A, Sabina. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why I turned it into Bina. Yeah.
Sure. Sure.
Oh, yeah, let me tell you a little bit. So I started working for Wirecutter, the New York Times, 3 months ago, and I took over their floor care appliances beat. And so right now I'm testing cordless stick vacuum cleaners and handheld vacuum cleaners. So we're redoing all the guides because there was no one on the speed for a while. So it's a lot of work right now. So, and I'm just kind of trying to basically like gain some sort of expertise on the
Sure.
subject. But so I don't know if you've read any of our vacuum cleaner guides or if you're
I
familiar with it.
briefly took a look probably about 3 weeks ago. So
Okay.
I'm just kind of generally loosely familiar. I was not familiar with Wirecutter at all.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
yeah, until just recently. But I did take a look at some, general reviews, and I looked at, like testing methodology, read a couple articles, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, so like there we do have expert interviews that where we incorporate quotes. So since you asked me like what this interview will be for, I will possibly, if the conversation goes well and everything, I might use some of your quotes attributed to you,
Oh,
obviously.
please feel free. Yes.
Okay, good. All right. So do you want to tell me a little bit about your background and how you got into this?
Well, boy, it's hard to kind of, condense things. Uh, I'm 58 years old, and I've always been interested in laboratory testing, through, say, physics and chemistry. My formal degree is mathematics. I have a computer programming background. Um, I've done a wide variety of things. I've even done some mechanical and electrical engineering, built my own test equipment. This is over the decades. And also, I've been a licensed amateur radio operator since 1980. So that's been a long time. So I've always been kind of a techie, scientific kind of nerd kind of guy my whole life. But I really enjoy working with my hands, taking stuff apart, also designing and building things. I've actually built from scratch. That is, many decades ago, I would write out circuits, diagrams, and then calculate everything by hand. And then, of course, you had computer programs out there that would help you with the calculations. And I would go and build some audio visual equipment and whatnot. This is like back in the 80s and 90s. So something came about where I was looking for an extra. I guess you could call it like, say, a side hustle. If you're kind of familiar with that term,
Mhm.
and I wanted to have fun taking things apart, like motors. I always love motors, love motors. I work on my cars, that kind of thing. I do all the basic maintenance with my vehicles. Been doing that since like the 1980s. But I wanted to go and figure out what really made vacuum cleaners tick. And I joined this one particular website called Vacuumland. It's vacuumland.org. It's a
Mhm.
pretty popular English speaking website out there, and I saw a great need to dispel vacuum lies and myths, both believed by the public and also perpetrated by manufacturers, unfortunately. They do have marketing departments that like to put spin on things.
Uh-huh, uh-huh,
So back in 2017, I took a look at what was available on YouTube, and
uh-huh.
I saw a great need to go and have something that was more scientific and laboratory based as far as testing goes. I mean, everybody has their personal preferences, and I'm always fine with that. If you really like what you have and you believe it's doing a good job, but I mean, who cares? It's a vacuum cleaner. It's not that serious of a subject. But I wanted to go and using mathematics, statistics, physics, and engineering, figure out what makes a vacuum good, what makes a vacuum bad, and how to, this is most important, how to predict how a vacuum works and see if I was right. So now, 5.5 years later, because I started my channel in May of 2017, I've gone through and done, it probably has to be the most extensive series of tests ever. And what I've always wanted to do was not hide anything. I don't just say, buy this and I think it's good because it feels good in the hand or the wife likes it or it's a good color scheme. I wanted to actually test better than everyone else. Um, that's a huge proposition. That's a massive proposition
Hmm.
because most of the people testing literally don't really know, or maybe they do know and they don't want to go and publish their raw data. If this is getting too technical and
Hmm.
out of
No,
the way
it's
for
okay.
what you're looking for, then let me know because I can go on and on and on for
Okay.
a long time because I
Well,
have
we have
like
about an hour or so.
sure. So I've got like over 1,300 videos, and I first started out with showing procedure. The single biggest thing you can do is show not only your raw data, but also your entire procedure, everything beginning to end. But you have to pair that statistically with reasonable measurements. So I had to go and say, well, looking at like a typical residential home in modern 2020s, what type of level of dirt do they have? What types of dirt do they have?
Interesting,
What's
yeah.
important? So I found out that people's homes, like your beautiful home, behind you, most likely, if you're somebody who's interested in, going to be watching a vacuum review video, especially a technical one, you're going to have a home where you're going to have a working vacuum. You're going to clean on a regular basis. You're going to generally take care of your vacuum. It's not going to be a Wild West like maybe what it could have been in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, 70s, where people would vacuum maybe once a month. If they vacuumed at all, people would, I lived on a couple of farms when I was a kid, and you could have the potential to have just, I mean, gargantuan amounts of dirt, picked up. But these days, in a modern home, people generally trying to pay attention to how well that they're going to keep it clean. We have HEPA filtration these days. We didn't have that back, 30, 40 years ago. I was interested in what made sense for type of dirt pickup and how much dirt, and also
Hmm.
what type of flooring. So I said, you know what? Let's go and actually pick an average, typical medium pile flow through carpet. And that's what I test on, but that's what's installed throughout my whole house. So I worked out the square footage and I did a whole bunch of tests, and I needed to verify, being a lab guy, that my tests were accurate, repeatable, they were statistically significant. The results didn't vary all over the place because I didn't want to look like a fool. I wasn't going to. I see some channels, they mean well, and I see some channels that they literally use um, a few cupfuls of black beans and they put that on top of the pile, the carpet, and they take a stick vac and they run it over it and they say, well, this one picks up 98% of the beans. Well,
Hmm.
I don't know how many people actually go and just pick up beans. So that doesn't make much sense. So I do, I do really, I've developed four major tests, and I always encourage everybody in fact, I challenge everybody who's interested in creating realistic tests to go and actually generally follow my guidelines that I've made public. I mean, for the last, well, almost 6 years now. So I go and test with sand. I go and test with baking soda. I go and do, as far as I'm aware of, I'm the first person to actually define agitation pickup, how much carpet tear out you actually get.
Uh-huh.
So do an agitation test. And I don't know if you're familiar with my videos or not.
Yeah, I am.
Oh,
I mean, I
wonderful.
didn't watch all of them, but
Oh, yeah,
I
I know.
watched a
There's too many
bunch.
to watch. They're far too boring to watch all of them. Agitation tests, proper particle tests. I mean, actual real particle tests where you're in a closed room, reasonable room with furniture. You've got a particle meter. You understand how to use it, that kind of thing. Airflow suction, blah, blah, blah. So generally, what I wanted to do was start something up. I didn't know where it was going to go. So I didn't know how popular it would be. Well, it's popular enough that obviously I'm monetized. I'm making money. I'm around 8,000 subscribers. Do you know that when I looked at the demographics, about half of them are women? And I'm very
Uh-huh.
happy about that. So I started a Mrs. Vac Lab series, which is my wife, Ellie.
Yeah, I saw one of those videos too.
Yeah, and it's extremely popular. She goes and does something, and people really like what she has to say about it. The woman's point of view, and I really wanted to do that. Not just this is the guy techno geek thing. That's kind of boring. So I went through all that. I've done all these tests. I've refined all these tests. I've added new tests, and what I found out was that this is the biggest single lie that the entire industry now believes. This is I'll call it here's a quote, the mutually agreed upon lie of suction. This is my huge pet peeve. So just briefly, without going into a massive diatribe, and I've made many videos on this, maybe you've seen them, but suction is a one-dimensional pressure.
I know.
It's not a volume of air, and it's not a movement. So suction does not what most people think. It does very little. And even if it did do a lot, the other part of the mutually agreed upon lie is that manufacturers go and post suction numbers that are pretty much measured at the motor end, and they post the highest number possible. And it's like, well, wonderful, that's great. It's a raw number. The problem is your usable suction is dramatically less. And I've got a huge database.
Tested at the motor, what?
Yeah, the motor end, or you could say, tested at motor end. So they will test at the highest possible measurement point to be very accurate about it. They'll get the highest number they can and say, our vacuum does so many kilopascals or so many inches of suction, whatever measurement standard you prefer to use. But the thing is by the time that suction gets down to the point of cleaning, of usability, it's dramatically less. Right. It's half, it's a fourth, it's a tenth. Sometimes it's actually zero. So there's a case of that where, are you familiar with rainbow vacuum cleaners?
Yeah, I've heard of them, but
okay, so
I haven't tested them. So that
all right. There's a brand new model that they brought out, and it literally cleans. Now, it's been measured not by me. It's an SRX model. I haven't personally tested it, but I have two other friends who have tested it. One's posted their video tests online, and it literally has zero measurable suction, 0 inches at the cleaner head. Now, it still picks up dirt, but it literally cleans with zero suction.
So we're going to get into airflow in a moment, but
sure.
In terms of suction, what would be a good suction, like measured
Great question.
The end of the tube?
Great question. So if you have too much suction and you have a nozzle that has, I love that you asked that question. Somebody cares. If you have too much suction and you pair that with a nozzle that is meant to seal to the carpet, not all nozzles are. I have a couple of vacuums, they have huge knockouts in them, and it does not seal to the carpet. pretty much based on my spreadsheet numbers of testing around 100 vacuums, what you want is a maximum of about 30 inches of suction for an average nozzle size, and also for a nozzle that's generally loosely meant to seal to the carpet. There's plenty of exceptions out there. So about 30 is reasonable, and that's all you need. Now, can you deal with less? Of
Uh-huh.
course. I have an early 1970s Hoover direct air machine, and it's got less than 20 inches of suction, and that's perfectly fine because it's backed up with massive airflow. So if you have too
Mhm.
much suction, that suction will try to prop up whatever airflow you have, but it doesn't prop it up as much as you think. It helps. So zero suction, I don't recommend. You need to have some,
Yeah,
but
yeah. Uh-huh.
but much more than 30 inches of suction, and you're working against yourself. The vacuum becomes more difficult to push, and it's unnecessary.
Okay. And so what about airflow? Like what's a good airflow number in your opinion?
Okay,
Or in
so
on based on your
so
testing?
airflow based on my measurements, it does depend on the vacuum. But if you're on a typical upright vacuum, like say you're a clean air machine, not an older direct air type. You're a clean air machine. Of course, you want as much as possible, but if you have too much, it's difficult to push again. So,
Oh, okay.
yeah, pretty much you're looking for around 80 CFM. That's just a
Measured where?
general range
Measured
measured
where?
at the nozzle, and these are sealed airflow box measurements.
Hmm.
So when you go and you seal the nozzle, whether it's meant to be sealed or not, when you use an airflow box, the typical base, what we call static measurements, I also have through the carpet. Did you see that series where I measured airflow through a pile carpet? That
No, I
answers
did
a,
not see that.
that actually
Okay.
answers a lot of questions. So yes, airflow through a pile carpet. And I use a wide variety of machines. It might be a dozen or something like that. It's been a few years since I've added to that playlist. But in general, for the most part, about 80 CFM for a
Okay.
clean air machine.
For like an upright, you're
Yeah,
saying.
yeah, that's right. An upright clean air machine or a
Okay, so
canister. It wouldn't matter.
a canister measured where also at the end of
That's going to be at the end of the
the
nozzle,
hose.
right? You're going to be around
Okay.
80 CFM. Yes.
So what about a cordless stick?
Okay, for a cordless stick vac, well, here. Okay, let me.
Because it has significantly less airflow,
Yeah,
right? Like
significant less airflow. So here's what the deal is. That I should do the overreaching. I should do the overarching uh, commentary on it. So in general, what you want in a vacuum cleaner, especially if you're going to be cleaning difficult to clean pile carpets, bare floor is a completely different story. You don't need much of anything because, frankly, a Swiffer will clean bare
yeah,
floors to a degree.
right. Hmm.
So I guess when you're trying to ask, what are you looking for? I want to make sure you don't get the wrong impression. So, what you want overarching when cleaning pile carpets, you want around maybe 20 to 30 inches of suction, right around in there, and you want as
You're talking
much
about
airflow
uh,
as you can push. Oh, go ahead. Go
so,
ahead.
so are you still talking about upright and canister, or are
Actually,
you talking about
they're
cordless now?
all there. It wouldn't make any difference because what the deal is how is a canister different than an upright? Well, the motor's connected by a longer hose in a canister, and an upright, you can still have a hose, but it's all one piece. It's all one item, right?
Right, but the motors aren't as powerful, right? Like, so I would imagine that the airflow is less because you have to carry the motors on the stick, so it's
Yeah. So
harder, like with the
if you
stick.
want to compare, but great question by the way. If you want to compare a canister to an upright, the motors can have the same power. I do have 12 amp uprights. I also have 12 amp canisters. The motors contained within at the motor, if you measure at the motor, they're about the same. But of course, by the time everything goes through the hoses, the connectors, and the wands and stuff like that, it
Uh-huh,
gets
uh-huh.
down to the nozzle. Then the end result, to be honest with you, in a well-made canister versus a well-made upright, they are about the same.
Uh-huh.
So in a canister and an upright, you will find in the better ones around say 30 inches of suction or so and around 80 CFM. Obviously that varies. That's both clean air canisters and clean air uprights. Obviously, lower end ones, less powerful ones do worse. Stuff
So
stuff does vary all over the map.
let's talk though about like we differentiate between uprights and cordless. I mean, they're
Yes,
both
yes,
upright, but
yes,
cordless,
yes, yes.
it's a much less powerful
Right, right.
tool than an
Okay, so
upright.
so if you want to talk about your stick vacs, because you're right in the middle of testing those.
Yeah. So just, I mean, just right now, like we can talk about other things too
Oh,
in this.
sure, sure.
I need to know what what you
Right.
just told me, but yeah,
So
I would be.
unfortunately, stick vacs, because of their limitations of being a lightweight stick vac and battery powered and whatnot, those are extremely underpowered. Now, for cleaning bare floors, they do fine. They do totally fine. But if you try to use them on pile carpets when they're really challenged, unfortunately, you will have most people use them either in their low mode or maybe a medium mode. And you will be somewhere between maybe 20 to 30 CFM. So that's what they test
Okay.
at. That's what they test at. I'm not saying that's good. I'm not placing a value judgment on it. I'm saying that's generally what they test at. So between
So
low and medium mode, about 20 to 30 CFM.
I'm really relieved to hear that, because that's the results I got between
Yes,
20
yeah,
and 30.
yep,
And I had read somewhere that a vacuum cleaner should be between 50 and 100, and then I got nervous and I was like, I
yeah,
might
yeah,
have done something wrong, or yeah. So
yeah.
okay,
No
so
doubt. Yeah,
that's
no doubt, no doubt.
so
So
20 to 30 sounds very
that's just
much
the
what I
tested
thought.
range. I'm not going to say that it's good or bad, but that's just the typical range from low to medium mode. Now, if you have a high mode on the machine, they will vary in general between, like say, 40 and 50. I mean, some of the lesser ones might be 35 on high mode. Some of the better ones might be in the low 50s, like with the Dyson, that kind of thing. But most people won't use them in their high mode because of reduced battery life. In a few
I think with
minutes
the
you're
Dyson,
done.
I got like 40, 45 or something. I got with the Dyson with the
Oh yeah, yeah,
V15, but
yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. So,
yeah.
sure, sure. So a lot of people won't
Uh,
run them at the high mode. Well, actually two
Oh,
big
low
reasons
mode.
on
Like
stick
I'm talking
vacs.
about the low mode. I
Oh
didn't
yeah,
test
yeah.
the high mode because the high mode is not really like feasible long term to always use the high
Right.
mode,
Yeah.
right?
It uses the battery life, but also it's
Um,
paired with so much suction that in many cases, if you put that on a pile carpet, it sucks down too much and you can't push it. But you can use it on a bare floor on high
so
mode just fine. Want to go into the general problems with stick vacs
yes,
is
I do. That
okay,
was actually my first question for you,
sure.
but then we got
Sure. Okay. So general
okay.
general problem with stick vacs is they're trying to do something that really shouldn't happen. Now, is it a wildly popular thing to buy? Oh, of course, people love their stick vacs. They're cordless and you can get an hour life on the battery and they're easy to maneuver. But the problem is you have a little teeny tiny fan in there, the diameter of which might be, say, 1 inch. Well, from an engineering standpoint, if you have a 1 inch fan, you can't move much air. And with no airflow, you can't move the dirt. So guess what they have to do? They have to move it at hundreds of thousands of RPMs. It's not uncommon to have one running at 100,000, 120,000, and even higher RPM. Well, from a physics standpoint, you get a tiny airflow because the fan's only that big, but you know what you get a ton of? Suction. It creates this huge air pressure. And when you run it on its highest mode, you have excess air pressure. So
Uh-huh.
the manufacturers don't know what to do with it, so they don't know how to slough it off. But if you've checked a Dyson, like say an 11, 12, have gates on the bottom of the nozzle. So this is counterintuitive. You want high power, but then you have to put a hole in your power nozzle to drain off suction and airflow because it's too much.
Uh-huh.
So that literally is an issue with all stick vacs, and it's a motor design problem that probably can't be changed very easily because you got a 1 inch
Mhm.
fan. You have like
Mhm.
say a 5 inch fan or bigger in other vacuums, and they generate airflow much easily, but of course lower suction.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Okay. All right. That's very interesting. So, what are some of the other common problems you encounter with like specifically stick vacs? And like we
Oh,
can
sure.
do this again once I'm writing the upright and the canister guide,
Mhm.
rewriting that, and we can do another interview and be more specific about that. But
Oh, sure.
yeah, for
So
for
so
stick vac.
stick vacs, you always have the problem of hair wrap. and people not cleaning the brush roll. You have problems with filters, cleaning the filters. And some manufacturers have gotten, shall we say, creative, and they put filters in such a spot that they're kind of hidden to the average user. Some people think, well, it's a bagless machine, so if I see the dirt and then I empty what's in the canister, then that's all I need to do. There's nothing else to clog up. And of course, clogs is, in any vacuum is one of the single biggest reasons why people get rid of machines, because something's clogged somewhere and they don't want to bother to deal with it, or they don't know about it. So it's always going to be filter cleaning, lack of filter cleaning, and it's going to be brush roll hair wrap. Those are the two most common things. And in bagless machines, to be honest with you, it doesn't have to be a stick vac issue. That can be just a general bagless upright issue or bagless canister issue as well. So those are the
So
most common things. Cleaning the
so
filters.
clean that people don't clean the filters,
People don't clean
basically.
the. Some people
Clean the
don't
filter.
even know there's filters in there. So I did one with a Tinco or a Tynico or however you pronounce that,
Tinko.
and there was a hidden center filter, and the owner had no idea it was there. And that's one of my highest viewed stick vac videos, if not the highest stick vac. I have to go and check. And all these women are going, "This is great. You saved my life. I was going to throw it out. I had no idea that there was that hidden center filter in there." They had no clue. They couldn't easily see it.
You mentioned the hair wrap, which is interesting
Right.
too, because we tested that. We have now narrowed it down to like 8 contenders for like, we have basically like 3 pick categories. Like one is our pick, one is a budget pick, and one is maybe an upgrade pick. So that's sort of how it works. And so a lot of them now have this new so-called anti-tangle technology, right? Like that's what they call it. I did not actually see a difference to like the technology being any better with long hair than than they were before, like the ones
what
that don't
lengths
have
of
it.
hair did you try
I
specifically?
tried both, and so 6 inches works better, but like once you go over 12 inches, it doesn't
Yeah, it
work
falls
anymore.
apart. Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The whole technology falls apart. So that's kind of what I found as well. Now, my wife has like
Uh-huh.
26-inch long hair, so it's extreme length.
Right.
But what I found was the DreamTech T10 does a fairly good job, and they have a those combs, but the combs are specifically just in the middle, right where the airflow goes in to the tube, and they also stick out or stick up fairly far, so they can really comb the hair. Now, I've been testing Miracle, which is a brand new machine that just came on the market, and they went nuts, and they have the combs, and it's the entire width. If you've seen that series that I just started to post. um,
Oh,
so the problem with theirs is they're very short and kind of nubby, and I mean, look, it helps. It's better than nothing. Oh, it's a lot better than nothing. But I think the Dream Tech at this point in time is a little bit better. I'm actually getting ready to do a head-to-head hair test. I'm collecting my
uh-huh.
wife's hair that's all over the place,
Right.
putting it in a container,
Uh-huh.
and I will do a head-to-head test at some point and publish it, where I do the Dream Tech
Mhm.
T10 versus the Miracle S3 Pro, and we'll see. But that, again, I know that's an extreme test. That's out of the ordinary. Not many women have 2 foot long hair. So if you do 6-inch stuff, it probably does nearly perfect. 12
Yep.
inch, it's probably and then when you get to extremely long,
No,
it's like,
12
it
inch
doesn't do
didn't
much.
work it out.
Yeah,
Work it. Oh, well, like I think it was a
yeah,
little longer. Maybe it's like 18 inches because I bought hair extensions for that
yeah.
test. Yeah. Another problem that we encountered specifically with Tinko, but also with the Black & Decker cordless stick, was that we used bird seats because a mixture of bird seats, because there's
Okay.
different sizes and the weight is
Right,
different. So
right.
that's one thing we use. We also use baking soda, but with bird seats, it would suck it up and then you turn off the machine and it all falls back out.
Right, right. So I understand there will be all types of specialty tests out there. I know there are people that have birds and they have bird seed stuck in a pile carpet. I did a whole series. I called it the impossible to clean bird seed carpet. So the
Uh-huh.
bottom line is it didn't make any difference what vacuum you used. how much
Oh,
airflow
really?
you had, how much agitation you had. I'm talking with 150 CFM, rip the carpet right out of your carpet. I mean, we're talking a royal that just rips and tears and is incredible. Now, did the real high airflow, higher agitation machines do a better job than everyone else? Of course they did. But if you're trying to get a stick vac to do birdseed stuff, it would be like trying to race a bicycle against a Ferrari. You have no
Well,
chance.
actually, like
I'm not talking about
we did
surface stuff. I'm talking about stuff that's in the pile.
in there. Okay, okay,
Yeah.
okay. So, but I'm not talking about them not sucking it up. So they do.
Yeah.
We tested it,
Yeah.
the
And then
bird
it
seeds
falls
on
back
bare
down.
floors. It
Yeah.
falls back down. So it's
Yeah.
something about the mechanism, like
Well, yeah,
that appears.
it's not meant. Stick vacs are not meant for large debris. You have large debris, whether it's dog food, cat food, bird seed, something with a large surface area, um, because they have, and people use them at their lowest or lower airflow. You got a stick vac. It's got to take that up through a long vertical tube, maybe like 3 feet. Well, if you're barely moving any air, it's going to bring stuff up through the nozzle, the power nozzle on the floor. It'll take it up a few inches or maybe a foot or two, but it can't literally get it into the bin and deposit it in there and then spin it around, because if you only have 20 or 30 CFM, that's just not enough. It's not even close to what you need for large, heavy, dense particles. You'll also notice that with sand, even though that's a small, dense particle, they just can't pick it up. It literally bounces around in the tube and then it can fall back
But
down. That's great you found that.
with the Tinko, we even had the problem with baking soda on bare floors. That
Oh, yeah.
that it comes back out. Not all of it, but
Right.
enough like that I wouldn't want to buy it, kind of.
What mode were you running it on?
Low. We've tested
Oh, yes.
everything on
Yeah.
low. Yeah.
Yeah, low is low. If you're running around 15 to 20 CFM, that's so low. That's just like people breathing, like that kind of thing. That's nothing. You can't pull it up through the tube. So you have to run at least medium to barely do it. And I even I think it was I went to Best Buy and I tested out at the time. It was a couple of years ago, the newest Dyson, and I ran it on low in Best Buy, and whatever it could pick up, if it could pick up anything, it would barely deposit it inside the canister and it would just sit there and nothing would even spin. You got no cyclonic separation. So it's not even working as a cyclonic vacuum. So you've got to run it in a higher mode. I always do my tests, and I tell people this. I'm completely honest with it. I said, I'm going to do my formalized tests on high, or if it's at all possible to do it on high. And 99% it is, not in every case. But when I go and run the machine and I do my mixed dirt pickup, which is the whole house carpet cleaning, that's probably the most practical one out there. I run it on um, I run it on a speed that gives me the opportunity to attempt as much as possible to get all 1,000 square feet cleaned without recharging the battery. So that usually means medium speed. But if I don't have that choice, I have to run it on low. I have no other choice. Because if the high speed only lasts like 8 minutes, then it's going to take me days to complete the test. And that's going to invalidate the results. I need to be able to do it in one shot, in one day, in a few hours, not over a period of days where I recharge the battery 4 or 5 times. So yes, on low, stick vacs are largely useless. And I mean, if you found that, you found the exact same thing that I have. If you only have two speeds, you have no choice for the average user to run it on low, and that's unfortunate. The stick vacs I prefer most are the ones with 3 speeds, and you can run it on medium. High speed usually is too much, but useful in some cases. Medium speed is the best to run it on. But when I do my formalized tests, I want to be fair, because if you get
Right.
an
That's
upright,
why I did.
yeah. So you plug it in, you have full power. If you're on a battery, I'm going to do stuff on full power to be fair, because otherwise I'm going to have too many people
So
complain.
you would have tested it all on full power. So I tested it all on low power because I thought, if then it's more even. If some have a 3-speed, some have a 2-speed, some only have 1 speed. Yeah.
Yeah.
So okay, so that that explains also a lot. So what are some of the biggest innovation that companies have come up with in the last 5 years or 10 years? Oh, so you said you're
Oh,
doing this since 2017.
2017 when I started my YouTube channel.
Right.
That's when I started
So
my YouTube channel.
okay. Oh, okay. So how many vacuums would you say you have tested over the years?
I have formally tested about 100. And of course, some of them get multiple tested. Like if you have 3 speeds, I'll test multiple speeds. But as far as different makes and models, about 100 so far.
But so just
And they're
you're
new and
talking about the
used.
YouTube for the YouTube
Yeah,
channel.
about 100.
And but you just hinted that you have been doing this for longer than since
Well, I've been doing
2017.
bits and pieces of it a little bit longer than that. Like I said, I joined Vacuum Land in 2014, and I've been working on electric motors since the 1970s. I mean, I've even built my own electric motors, small little hobby things and whatnot, wind the armature yourself and whatnot from kits and stuff like that since the 1970s. So I've been doing all types of electrical work and mechanical stuff for many, many decades. But it
Hmm.
just kind of migrated into vacuum cleaners when I saw there was a need to try to dispel myths and lies. And I would say, to be honest with you, I think I know what you're trying to hint at. But to be perfectly honest with you, I don't think there's actually been I don't think there's been any big breakthroughs. I don't think that there's. I think there's been migrations of things. Like obviously, when James Dyson said "say goodbye to the bag," he did not invent bagless systems, but he certainly perfected them and marketed them properly, and has a $1 billion company now. So he did a great job with that. There's a lot of people. There's people that invent things, and then there's people that perfect and market things, and they're the ones that get recognized. So you certainly need to recognize James Dyson for perfecting the practical use and sales of bagless vacuums. No doubt. You cannot deny that. He's been wildly successful for that. But he didn't invent the idea of a cyclone. And he didn't invent bagless vacuums just in general, but he certainly popularized them. So much so that he's now garnered, massive competition, which I think is a great thing. I love competition. Otherwise, everything would be would be really overpriced.
But you're basically saying that was the last big breakthrough is the to
It
make
was just a
cordless
repackaging of what
bagless.
already existed. And what's funny with Dyson vacuums is if you look at his progression of what he stated was important, how he, his designs of vacuums, and then his foray into stick vacs, now trying to be mainly stick vacs, and you look at his brush roll designs and his cyclonic designs. What's so interesting, specifically focusing on the brush rolls, is if you look at, like, say, a Ball Animal 2, which is a newer upright Dyson, it's basically the same type of brush roll as what you've had for many, many decades. And it took Dyson decades to arrive at that fact that if you want to use one of his vacuums on pile carpets, you've got to have a standard, recognizable, non-wild looking brush roll like what he used to have in the early 2000s, of those really funky things. And, if you look at the stick vacs, it's much of the same way. So I know that Shark has come out with some wild brush rolls, but even though I do have a bunch of Sharks, I don't have all of them. That would just be too much. But the fins for brush rolls rather than bristles and whatnot. In general, they're good for some types of specialized dirt pickup and a certain very specific types of flooring, but they miss the point of being a good all-around cleaner, which some people still demand. There are some people that want specialty cleaners. I'm fully willing to admit that. And they need a specialty type of vacuum and a specialty type of brush roll. But it's hard to test for smaller groups of people. I mean, you probably should. But if you want something that, is an all-arounder, you need something that's more I guess, averaged or genericized for design. That way, you're not dealing with something that only works well on perfectly flat, bare floors. And the second you hit a mat or a carpet or a rug, doesn't work at all. That kind
Yeah.
of thing, and vice
Yeah.
versa.
Hmm.
So yeah, I really haven't seen anything that I would call groundbreaking. I see marketing differences. People taking the same thing and just repackaging it and going, "Look, it's this new technology." And it's like, all you did was just go and, put combs on something, or, you have 10 cyclones instead of 5 cyclones or something. It's more or less of something. I don't see that much of a breakthrough.
Right.
But not
Um,
personally.
and do you personally test for longevity too?
Yes, I do. That's one of the things I actually do, but probably not in the way that you think. I mean, there's lots of ways you could test for longevity. You could say turn a vacuum on and run it until it, catches on fire, blows up. But what I do is through complete teardowns of vacuums that you'll see. I mean, I do total motor teardowns, replace bearings, stuff like that. Take a good long hard look at of wear patterns, what's there. I look at brush rolls, bristle length, bearings, that kind of thing.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Um, and I
Of
do
like
that
stuff
with
you find
acquiring
or
used vacuums. And I able to
yeah.
test the used vacuums, say what vacuum has made it to 3 years, 5 years, 8 years. And I find that there's a lot of misinformation about that, because you'll see people that'll say, well, don't buy this particular vacuum because it'll last 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months, and then you throw it out. And that's usually user error. I mean, 90+% of the time it's user error. I get some of these cheap
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
vacuums, and the vacuum might be
Mhm.
8, 10, 12 years old. The vacuum's a very inexpensive budget model. And, all it needs is a little TLC. Change a belt, change some bearings, maybe re-grease something, change a brush roll,
Mhm.
change a bag or a filter, and it's off and running. Sometimes I do find some heavy damage, holes in the hoses, but it's all usually from user abuse. So
Mhm.
I have vacuums that are of all ages, all the way going back to the 1960s. And
Mhm.
I'll do teardowns of most of them, but not all of them. And I find that, to be honest with you, if you are reasonable with your vacuum, which most people aren't, unfortunately, you can take any vacuum and make it last 10 years, no matter what.
Even a stick vac?
Now, a
Even a
stick
stick
a
vac?
stick vac is different because you've got a totally different level of technology. The motors are wildly different, and the batteries are wildly different. So I'm specifically talking about mains powered plug-in vacuums that you can make them
Mhm.
last.
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
can make them last so long you get tired of looking at them. But for a stick vac, it's totally different. So you've got charging systems. I had this one, and I did a series on it, and it was a brand new design. And this vac life, the charging system failed. The battery didn't fail, the charging system logic failed,
Mhm.
and they had to come out with a new firmware update. So I actually posted that. So that's in my vac life playlist. So yes, unfortunately, with a lot of technology, the more complex you make things, then the easier it is the more complicated the plumbing, the easier it is to plug up the drain. An old saying. When you have all this regulatory stuff in there, and then complex and sensitive lithium batteries, then no, you're going to have severely reduced life. Absolutely. And if you have people that then continue to use and abuse them, you don't get very many years out of them. They just
Mhm.
they do not hold up. So that creates a waste problem. So many people go, wow, it's all electric and it's batteries and it uses less power. And the big problem is you end up throwing these away. Well, I mean, who knows? But maybe on average of every 1 to 2 years, because you have
Yeah.
an electronic failure. It could be the battery pack goes poof. It could be the charging system goes bad. It could be the very delicate low power weak motors go bad. So by and large, if you haven't looked at this, take a look at consumeraffairs.com and pissed off consumer, I think that's a .com, and read their comments. And I've read all of these comments going back, well, I think to 2014. I literally went in, such a geek, and read all these comments. And I mean, some of them are throwaway comments. They're just people trying to vent. But you see where somebody's trying to do their best to make something last, and they get these vacuums, even brand new, and they're dead in the box. They're literally, they won't turn on, they won't charge, failures, and they can't even use them once. And then they have customer service problems. And so, yes, unfortunately, probably the most thrown away vacuums out there are going to be battery powered stick vacs. It's creating a huge amount of waste. So I'm a little disappointed in that, but it's because it's super high technology. I mean, you have a Wi-Fi app to manage your stick vac. Things have gone a little too far.
Yeah. That's true. Let me see what else, because you mentioned sustainability, and that interests me also a lot. Do you find that some companies are kind of greenwashing?
Totally, totally, absolutely.
Do you have any examples of that?
Well, okay, here's a general example, and I don't necessarily need to bring in specific names per se, because it's the marketing industry in general is rife with this. So we've even found out. I also follow a lot of electric car channels on YouTube, and now this is going to vary. Obviously, everything varies, but it's now coming to a head where in certain circumstances it can cost the same or more per 100 miles to drive an electric car than it does a gas car that gets reasonable gas mileage. Now, obviously, there's variables in there, but the fact that that even exists at all shows you massive greenwashing. So if you just go back to vacuums, if you go and you take, let's see, you go back to, the oldest technology out there for vacuum cleaners is direct air. I don't know if you had a chance to test any direct air vacuums yet, but if you ever get a chance, they're going to blow your mind. It's a technology that's over 100 years old. And remember, people have been working on this for, well, over 100 years. By and large, direct air vacuums, those are vacuums out there that literally the dirt flows directly into and through the fan and then right out the exhaust, and the bag is connected directly to the exhaust. They're super efficient because the nozzle, I should say the fan in the nozzle, is this close to the dirt. There's no tubes or anything. There's no complexity. And the motor is also separated from the dirt. So no dirt flows through the motor. It flows through the fan, but not the motor. So the motors stay clean, but relatively clean compared to other types, even in the event of a disaster, because the dirt goes through the fan. So the deal is you don't need much power to run these. And if you look at, like, say, a classic Oric machine, if you look at a classic, say, Kirby machine, even going back 40, 50 years, these machines only use, 3, 4, 500 watts, not that much. And they provide ridiculously high airflow for the power usage they have. So I think I recently tested a Kirby Avalier, and they use even far less than their rated power. So you're talking maybe less than 700 watts, and you have 150 CFM on a big wide nozzle, so you can clean large areas quickly, and backed up with about 30 inches of sealed suction right in the sweet spot. And that type of a setup will give you a tremendously great clean, will use far less power than a clean air upright that can use twice as much power and have half the airflow. So it's a much more efficient system. Yeah, and it's really great. And the machines, if you decide to take care of them, not everybody does, but some people do, they literally last forever. There's a saying in there, buy your last vacuum first. I didn't come up with that. Somebody else did long time ago.
Huh.
So it's a lifetime machine. You could buy you if you wanted to, you could buy one machine and it would last indefinitely. Cheap parts are available. And in some cases, they're easy to replace. Some cases, not so much. I mean, people aren't as mechanically inclined as when I was a kid. So a lot of people don't want to bother with it. But you could imagine if you could buy a car and have a car do a good job being a car, and you got good gas mileage, good power, and you had to buy one car in your entire lifetime. That would be pretty amazing to be able to do that. So you could
Right,
do
right.
that. But these days, we're a consumer society. We want to go and change phones every year.
Yeah,
Whee,
yeah,
new
it's
things comes out.
terrible. Yeah.
We want to go and
Mhm.
buy the latest, say, Dyson or Shark product just because there's a they put lights on the front. I remember when Dyson said, I'm kind of ragging on Dyson a bit because they're kind of hilarious. They over-engineer their stuff. First they came out with stick vacs, and then they had something where you didn't
The
have a
trigger.
trigger. Yeah,
Oh,
you had to hold it the whole time, and Dyson said you'll get used to it. And then
yeah,
now now they walked away from that.
ditched it. Yeah,
Yeah, they did. And
ditched it.
then
I
and then
just
they
wrote
didn't
an
have.
article about that
Yeah,
actually. Yeah,
there
go
you go.
ahead.
Perfect, perfect. And then we're not going to put lights on the vacuum because it's inefficient. Nobody needs lights on the vacuum. Now they have green
Oh,
lights on the
they
vacuum.
have the laser.
Everybody,
And I have to
everybody,
say,
like,
like, like
hilarious.
some vacuums just have like regular white lights.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
that laser light, the green laser light, is actually pretty good. I don't know if you've tested it, but it's really nice to go under your bed or something, and you can see
Right.
where there's dust
Yeah,
and whether you've really
it's just a
covered the
different
whole.
it's
Yeah.
just a different color. So it's green, and green will illuminate things differently than other colors.
Yeah.
So they just went, hey, what looks better? Green looks good. Okay, let's go with green. It's
I
different than white.
yeah. I mean, it's
Yeah, it does
stronger.
show
I mean, there's
it
something.
does show dirt differently, sure. But
Yeah.
really what it was is we're not going to go with lights. Now let's go with the green light. Other manufacturers said, well, let's go with white lights because somebody vacuums in the dark. And they said, well, you know what? Let's go ahead and try some green lights. So I have a Miracle and it's got green lights. I like the green light. I don't have any argument with the green light. That's wonderful.
Do
But
the
I mean,
companies send? Sorry.
yeah, go ahead.
Go no. Do the companies send you vacuum cleaners?
Yes. So I
Yeah.
do not get paid for my reviews. I
Right.
believe me, they offer me money, sometimes a lot of
Oh, they
money.
do.
I
Oh,
do
really?
not accept payment for reviews.
Interesting.
Under any circumstances, but I will accept a free product because that's how I get the product to review. And then I'll just, I'll keep the product. But to be honest with you, I've got so many vacuums here. I wouldn't mind, if they
What do
sent
you
me a
do?
return shipping label and send it back. I don't need
What
to
do you
keep them
do?
all.
And do you sometimes get like negative feedback with your reviews from companies?
Oh, from the
Like,
company? Oh,
yeah.
sure. So I go and I do I set up a set of testing standards years ago, and before I wanted to accept any type of new products for review, I wanted to make sure that those standards were set and fixed, or set and fixed as much as possible. So I wouldn't I wouldn't have the appearance of any favoritism at all. Every vacuum gets treated exactly the same. So then, the manufacturer sends me a vacuum. If it happens to be a brand that tests as number one in its category, well, they're all happy and they're all smiles and stuff like that. But sometimes a manufacturer will send me a machine and maybe it's a budget model and it tests very poorly. So they go, well, it's a budget model. It's $100. What do you expect? Sometimes it's an expensive model and it doesn't test as well as they think. And I've definitely encountered that recently where they don't know. I'll just be perfectly straight with you. Some of these new companies out there need to understand proper pricing points. And some of them, they just don't get it. They go, you know what? It's a stick back and I can sell it like it's 24 karat gold. So if I have features that are similar to other higher priced brands, I'm going to sell it at a, bazillion dollars, so to speak. And they find out that it doesn't test very well. It doesn't pick up very well. It's not built very well. There's some kind of weird problems. And yeah, I sure get negative feedback. Absolutely. But I go and say, well, those are the tests, and I haven't performed them improperly. I haven't
Mhm.
lied, cheated, misled
Mhm.
anybody.
Mhm.
I've done the tests, and the tests
Mhm.
stand as the tests. I've also had companies say, "Well, can we have our engineering department check this out, and can you unlist the video until we figure this out?" I go,
Yeah.
"No, I'm a
Yeah.
video journalist." So
Yeah.
unless I screwed up the video, and by the way, I don't post videos where I've done something that's obviously wrong because I
Mhm.
can perform the test again. So
Mhm.
if I don't if I perform 1,000 tests, I'm gonna end up messing something up or forgetting how to do something, or I'll drop a screwdriver or whatever. I can fix that. That's easy. So I don't need to go and post tests that are inaccurate.
Uh-huh. And so my last question is, obviously, they are companies are dishonest when it comes to airflow and suction because, as you said, they tested right at the motor end.
Yeah.
So, are there any other things that you've noticed where companies are dishonest, in
Um,
terms of specs, or performance?
Companies are dishonest. Well, they go and post, like you just mentioned, they go and post unusable or incorrect suction numbers because they have electronic limiting. So the suction gauge will go, blah, 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 when you go up to the high level, or they have a suction relief valve. So you can't ever experience maximum suction. So they go and have a lab test in which they take the motor, or they rig it in such a way to get a laboratory test number that doesn't translate into real life. Manufacturers have stopped, by and large. There's one exception that I can find. It's Sanitaire. They still post their airflow numbers, or they did the last time I looked a few months ago. Companies need to post their real at the nozzle airflow numbers. And a few companies used to do that. Now, as far as I'm aware of, it's just Sanitaire and maybe one other brand that I can't recall offhand. But it's airflow that's going to move the dirt once the agitation frees it up from your flooring.
Mhm.
Um, they don't post accurate for plug-in mains powered systems. They do not post accurate power usage numbers. Yeah, in the
Okay.
United States, they say uses 12 amps. And I can't tell you how many 12 amp systems I've tested and they run at 10 and a half amps or 11 amps. And if you run it on thicker carpet, the power usage can go up, but in some cases, it never hits the 12 amp mark, not even close. Let's see. For battery powered stick vacs, I am impressed that now, probably because of FTC, Federal Trade Commission regulations, they have to go and put realistic numbers on both the charging, little wall warts, and also on the batteries themselves. Like a watt hour usage, voltage and current and whatnot. And they have to do that. They can't be wildly off. That's great that they do that. I'm impressed with that. I'm happy. But with the stick vac, what you really see
So that's the
manufacturers,
ampere, or what?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, amperage, voltage, but also there's a watt hour usage on the battery, and then
Right.
on the charging wall wart, they will go and have also the DC, current out and voltage output. They have to have those about right. I'm glad that they do. If those were way off, there'd be a ton of
Okay.
lawsuits.
Okay. All right. And how do you like? What's a good voltage output in a cordless stick?
I can tell you like typically what the average is, but I'm not going to equate that and say it's good because
Okay. So what's the average? Yeah.
more is always better.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to probably say just kind of loosely running around in my mind, I'm going to be looking for something that's close to 30 volts and something that has a watt hour rating of at least say 60 watt hours on a lower end machine. Higher end machine is going to be around 100 watt hours, but that creates problems because in some cases, um, the stick vac gets too heavy if you have a battery in it that's too powerful. So more is always better, but if you have something that's monstrous, I mean, and manufacturers are doing that now these days, and they're doing it cheaper and cheaper. I mean,
Hmm.
the battery is wonderful. It's great, but it's so heavy and it takes so long to charge
Hmm.
that most people will now look at that and say it's worse. If they compare it to a machine that's more modest, maybe a 60 watt hour battery, maybe something that's like 25 volts, and the whole machine weighs like 2 pounds less, which is a big deal in stick vacs.
Right, right. Uh-huh.
Handle weight,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
is very easy to measure. I don't know if you measure that or not. That can make a big difference, as well as maneuverability.
Uh-huh.
So, I
Well,
mean,
I
but
wish they would all put their motor on the bottom, right? Like it would be so much. I mean, I find the machines much easier to steer when they have the motor and the filter and everything on the bottom as opposed to, and then you just carry the handle and it propels itself forward.
yeah,
You
yeah.
don't have to.
Yeah, that's a fundamental problem with vast majority of stick vacs is the
Yeah,
motor, the bin, and the battery is all right at your well, it's in your hand, but it's
yeah,
affecting your wrist.
yeah,
Yeah, and that's somewhat
yeah,
of an issue. And by
yeah,
the
yeah,
way,
yeah.
the best overall stick vac I've ever tested as far as
Uh-huh,
maneuverability
uh-huh.
is a Kyvol, Kyvol, and that machine was designed
K
so
K
well.
Y. Sorry,
Yeah,
KY
K
what?
Kyvol. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
Kyvol.
Okay, I've
And
never heard of
that,
that company. Mhm.
yeah, that's a kind of a rare thing. It's a model V20, V20, and every time I put that in and use it, it's got some very good pickup, by the way. It's
Uh-huh.
not class leading, but it's close. And the design in it just blew my mind the second I started. I even turned it on. It does overall everything well, and it's inexpensive. I don't know if they make it anymore, but
Is that a Chinese company or what is that? I mean, I
uh,
can
I,
look it up. I can look it
yeah,
up.
yeah, I
Yeah,
believe
yeah.
so. The vast majority of these companies are
Uh-huh.
going to be, yeah. But that's
Have
oh,
yeah.
fantastic. Thank you
What are
very much.
some serious YouTube channels that you respect?
Uh, that is a very complex and tough question.
Okay.
I'm unfortunately a real stickler for if you're going to test, if you're going to do serious tests, not all of them do, but if you choose to do serious tests, do them right. A, a clear indicator that you're not doing your test right is the wrong statistical graph results. If every vacuum gets an A, you're doing it wrong, without a doubt. If every vacuum you test gets an F, you're doing it wrong. You need to have some type of a bell curve. Okay. I mean, statistically speaking, if you test enough vacuums over, a wide enough frame of performance reference, you're going to get a bell curve. Small percentage at the bottom doing badly, small percentage at the top doing well. Most are going to be average in the middle. That's really where you're going to be, and that's where all my statistical data is. Took a while to get there. Unfortunately, I can't, I'm well aware of many channels out there, but if I give you some names of those channels, you're going to see poorly run tests. And
Okay, then yeah, you
some of
don't
those
have to.
channels are very
Okay,
popular.
so
So I'm
let's
like,
sum up. Yeah.
makes me queasy. They get some things right. Other
Uh-huh.
stuff, they're so far off.
Uh-huh.
They make me want to throw up. They're so bad. And for God's
Uh-huh.
sakes, don't do a fog test. Do
A
not,
what?
please don't do a fog test.
What
Now,
is
I don't
that?
know if you've seen that. So what it is
No.
they take a fog generator, like to go
Uh-huh.
fill fog in a room, like at a
Uh-huh.
disco, and they go and they take the output, like say the 600 CFM output of a fog generator, and they jam it into a tube, right, at full power, and they literally blow the vacuum up, or they try to, and they go, oh, because it leaks, this is a terrible vacuum. Yes, it's
Uh-huh.
wildly popular to do fog tests, and they're
Uh-huh.
totally
Uh-huh.
wrong
Huh.
because as you know, fog is water. And also, the vacuum manufacturers say, don't pick up or try to filter water. Our vacuums aren't
Uh-huh.
rated for it
Yeah.
unless you
Uh-huh.
have a water vacuum, like, say, a rainbow, for example. that could filter water. You could do a fog test on Rainbow, but they try to go and do filtration tests based on hooking it up to a fog machine running at full power and trying literally to blow all the seals and the bags in machines. And it's like, for
Mhm.
God's sake, please don't do a fog test. They're totally irrelevant.
So, could you, or you can also send me that in email. So, what tests do you perform? Obviously, you said suction
Okay,
and
so so
airflow.
so the tests that I perform, I do some static and I do some practical. So the standard sealed tests where I seal the nozzle to the airflow box. And by the way, I also post a video on how to build my airflow box. It's double
Okay.
sided. One for small nozzles, one for large nozzles, and you just flip the airflow box over to use one or the other. It saves on tape. Um, so I do sealed airflow, sealed suction at the nozzle. Um, and then I do brush roll RPM, multiple speeds if necessary. I do particle emissions tests. Um, those I can do directly stuck on the filter itself, right close up to the vacuum. But then to show practical tests, how they still aren't as relevant as people think, I do closed room air filtration tests. I did enough to prove that essentially vacuum filtration, as far as the exhaust filter is concerned, unless the vacuum is broken, those tests in many cases are largely irrelevant. It's a marketing ploy. So
Hmm. Hmm.
the air quality in your home is going to be markedly worse than your vacuum cleaner. And running your vacuum cleaner, even if it's a sealed system, isn't going to change your air quality much,
Hmm.
if
Hmm.
at all.
Hmm.
But those are the tests I
Okay.
perform. I do sand in the carpet. I do baking soda in the carpet. And I also do general mixed dirt pickup. That's the whole house carpet cleaning. And that's everything. That's loose carpet fibers, that's dog hair, that's fine dust, whatever happens to be
Okay.
in my carpet. And I reset my believe it or not, it's going to sound weird. It's like I had somebody actually ask me this. Said, "How dare you actually post a test where you vacuum your house and you say that that creates a standard?" Well, before I start posting any test, I do a viability study. I run the tests and I make sure that I have a consistent, reliable, reasonable average. So I did all that and I found out that dirt accumulation in my house is actually very consistent. We are creatures of habit. We go to work, a certain way. We run around the house a certain way. We play with our pets a certain way. Da da da. And it's generally the same, and you can measure it. The big thing is measure it. Let the data tell the story. Don't do things based on personal opinion or what you feel like. So what I did was I did all that back in 2016 and 2017. I said, aha, I can actually do real mixed dirt pickup and get consistent results within, like, say, plus or minus 5%. So statistically significant. So I did that, and that's why I published those. And I found that those also create a nice bell curve as well. Stick vacs at the bottom, canisters and most uprights bunching up in the middle, and then direct air machines for the most part at the top. And
Okay.
that's exactly what you would figure out. And it's wonderful that you can be that consistent and get that type of mixture pickup.
Hmm.
I would also
So
recommend that go ahead.
you don't do Cheerios or glitter, because that's a
Glitter,
big
yeah.
complaint of parents, like that, their
Yeah,
stick
cheers and glitter.
vacs can't
So for
yeah.
stick vacs, if you're talking about stick vacs or bare floor tests, when I started doing stick vacs more heavily, like say a year and a half ago, I do a wider range of tests, and a lot of them do stuff on bare floors. And feel free to take a peek at them. So I do 6 different types of debris on bare floors. So I do dog food. I do a small dog food, which could be close to a cat
So
food. That's the
oh,
largest
cat
stuff.
food.
Just they're kind of Cheerios ish, but yeah,
Uh-huh,
they're
uh-huh,
close to
uh-huh.
Cheerios. And then I do baking
I saw
soda.
that.
I do sand. I do oats. I do rice. You get the idea. So I do
What was the
six different
last
types.
one? What
Oh,
was the last?
yeah, oats, rice,
Rice. Okay. Mhm.
flour,
rice is sort of similar to some stuff in bird food as well.
But sure, sure, sure.
Because the bird food has like different sizes, different
Right,
types of
right.
seeds.
I do that on bare floor, and then I also do some of that on a low pile like couch cushion, and then I put the stuff. I do it on medium pile carpet, but I don't do the stuff that easily falls down into the carpet because that's a separate test. So the
Uh-huh.
stuff that stays on top, the topical surface cleaning tests, I'll put the larger
Uh-huh.
debris on the carpet for stick vacs. We're just talking about stick vacs that you can see that stays on the carpet, like oats and
Uh-huh.
dog food and rice. So I do that. But then on bare floors, everything goes on there.
Okay. All right. Okay, so I'm not that far off then, I guess. But
Yeah,
I'm
yeah, yeah,
convinced we should hire you
yeah,
actually to do all these tests.
yeah.
Okay, so I will be in touch and we can talk again. That was very fascinating and a lot of fun
Sure.
to talk to you. Yeah, if I have questions, follow-up questions to this interview, I'll just be in touch via email. You mentioned, what is it called? Like vacuum land or something? Vacuum?
Yes, yeah, vacuum. That's a great place to go if you want to talk about, say, new and vintage equipment, and you want to get
Oh, I see.
people who are really into, say, rebuilding and locating vintage equipment and some
Uh-huh.
new equipment. As far as I know, I haven't looked at this statistic or anything, but they're fairly popular for an English speaking, like North American vacuum group website. Fairly popular. Although I know now with the advent of what is it? Not discuss. Oh, geez. I can't think. I can't think of the name offhand. Discord, and also Facebook and their various uh, things you can do on Facebook. That there are probably some gatherings of people and groups that are much larger. But I'm talking about going back years ago when I started reading. Other stuff wasn't as popular. That was good to go to for a lot of specific information. Like I have a 20-year-old machine. What's this part number, or does this work,
Oh,
or is this
okay, I
any
see.
good? That kind of thing.
Yeah, I see. And so what do you have any recommendations? I would like to talk to a store owner, someone who's done this a long time, who's, recommended vacuum cleaners to clients and has seen
Right.
which ones come back, which kind of with certain kind of problems. And
Okay. So if you're talking to somebody that doesn't do tests but owns
yeah,
stores, sells vacuums,
yeah.
and sometimes repair them, probably the best overall person I know of is Tom Gasco.
Yeah, so
Gasko. Yes.
isn't he the guy like who had the museum also?
Yes, he did.
Yeah, so
Yes.
I can't get an email of it. Like I can't find an email address of him.
Oh,
For him.
go
Yeah.
to Vacuum Land, and
Uh-huh.
you can actually join. And let me take a look here. I don't know. I don't think I have his email address handy. Let me take a quick peek. Yeah, I don't have
What
anything. I don't have anything current on hand. But yeah,
does he
Gasko.
have a store or an internet
He,
business?
he has he has his own store. Yes, it's in
Okay, so it's the
Missouri.
same Gasco because I wasn't sure if it's the
Yes,
same
it is.
Gasco.
Yeah, he has
Okay,
his own store
okay,
again. Yes,
okay. All right. So I can probably contact him through
yes,
the
yes, and
store then. Yeah.
he has probably the best overall experience with vacuums going back 100 years, all the way up to new stuff. He had his own store before he had the vacuum museum, and now he has his own store after the vacuum museum, and he tells
Okay.
great stories. Great
Okay.
stories.
Okay. So I'll contact him. I'm sure then I can find out with
Yeah.
your help. Okay. Great. Thank you so much for talking to me. It was
All right,
fun.
Vina. Thank you so much for meeting you, and enjoy your time at Wirecutter.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Bye
Bye.
bye.